I call them weekend warriors. So I have a lot of representatives, representing various universities that we cater to. So I call them the weekend warriors because it's Friday generally when the world is prepping towards the weekend and making plans to go out for movies and
Beers
clubbings
and
and
yeah.
spending time with their friends and family. The representatives are generally checking into their flights and packing their bags and traveling and hopping cities, hopping hotels, jumping from one place to another.
Hi, welcome back to the new episode of Living Port by none other than your anchor Saurabh Arora. I'm the founder and CEO of University Living. Today we have another interesting star of this industry of higher education. His name, his story, is well known in the industry. But for all the people who want to be part of higher education, folks who've been already part of higher education, and all the students who want to learn what is the benefit of study abroad, what was their journey, how they navigate their journey. Lots to learn from none other than Mr. Jasminder Khanna, who is a CEO of Gresham Global, which represent lots of universities in India and globally. And I'll take it to him. And why don't you introduce yourself officially?
Well, thank you, Saurabh. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and it's nice to be in your office. My first visit, very very pleasant, very welcoming office, I must say. My name is Jasminder. Thank you for the kind introduction. I don't think I have anything else to say. Well, I've been in this industry for a little while now, and what I do is support foreign universities to enter India, to grow in India, and work very closely with them in developing their visibility, developing their growth in the Indian market and subsequently the South Asian market as well.
So you mentioned you have spent little time here. Can you elaborate a little time?
So my journey with this industry started back in 2009. It's roughly about 15 years ago now. So that's when I finished my studies in the UK, finished my undergraduate in the UK. And don't ask me what did I study, because that will lead us into a different direction now. And that will open a plethora of questions. So when I graduated, I wanted to join the industry of the subject that I'd studied. However, it was a very small industry at that point, and finding jobs wasn't as easy as we expected. And the question at that point, because your family has already funded you for 3 years, they funded your education, they funded your living, and it becomes very very awkward for you to keep going back to your family and keep asking for little pocket money for your survival.
That too in pounds.
That too in pounds. And that was the time I thought I'll rather pick up something that I'm getting now, and then I'll keep looking for a job in my sector alongside. And that's when I got into the education industry. My start in this sector was from a vocational learning center. It wasn't a college, it wasn't a university. That's how I got into it. I also enrolled myself on a qualification which allowed me to teach in the UK. So I've also taught in the UK for a little while. And that's how my journey began. Then I progressed into further education and then eventually higher education, and then relocated to India in 2016. And it's been 8 years since I'm back, and very much part of the same industry, and enjoying every day that I work here.
Interesting, very interesting. So I guess you are one of those examples, who have taken a punt, got out of comfort zone, probably went to study from best of the education systems, and when you're studying the best education system, all the universities are good.
Correct.
All the courses are good, and I know you asked me not to ask, but what did you study?
Right. Since you ask, I am a biotechnologist by qualification, and before you ask me why am I not in a laboratory and what am I doing here, like I said, it wasn't a very easy industry to find your way into at that point in time, and the interviews were taking time, the jobs were taking time.
And that's when. What year was this?
This was 2009. This is the year I graduated. But then I got into education, and then, honestly speaking, never looked back. Never really felt the need to go back to finding jobs in biotechnology, and that was one industry that I fell in love with, and honestly, it's, in my career, I've opened my eyes with education, and I've never worked for any. So if you ask me if I want to diversify myself today, I honestly don't know anything
And
else.
you don't need to. You're doing very well for yourself. You are representing best of universities. We'll come to that. Right now, you are gone entrepreneur. In the same ecosystem. So we'll go back to that journey.
Sure.
But you mentioned 2019 till 2016. You were in UK.
Correct.
As a teacher.
2009 to 11, when I was teaching ESOL courses, which are English for speakers of other languages. So you got to be qualified to teach ESOL in the UK, which was regulated by awarding bodies such as edXL, City and Guilds. I've worked very closely with these awarding bodies. I've worked very closely with the ecosystem in vocational education delivery. Apart from ESOL, of course, the place that I worked for offered a lot of other programs as well. These are very short, skill-based, job-oriented programs. So that's how I started my journey. And then eventually got into more formalized, organized education systems.
So I relate to a lot because I also started my journey into education back in 2011-12. But I also started with something which is not very mainstream. Accommodation, post-admission.
Correct.
I still remember people used to look down, accommodation, post-admission must be a lifestyle business. And it was. That bad thing, it was, because, take lots of pride of me, my team, wherein, in transforming the post-admission industry or a sector, especially on the housing side. So I can relate what it must have been, from coming from India, studying in UK, studying something which is not mainstream, and probably post 2008 mortgage crisis.
Correct.
The industry was down and out. Biotech you studied, but probably you didn't find your passion. And there was no jobs.
Correct.
Then you move into something which probably move your needle. So that's what I keep saying, that people plan a lot. But probably most of the success stories are unplanned. But there are a couple of common things, which is they were unplanned, but if someone got something which they are enjoying and growing, they stuck with it.
I think the key here is passion. How passionately you do what you do defines how far you go in your career. And I think now I don't go on the ground representing universities, but I've done that for a long time in my career, and I sometimes go back to my team and I ask them if there's still an opportunity for me to go and sit in a recruitment fair or talk to a student. They don't allow me. This Jasminder, you can relax in your office. You've done this long enough. You don't need to come into the fair. But I was talking to one of the organizers, one of the big agents in the industry, and they're organizing a fair in Mumbai in Jan. I said, can I just walk into the fair as a student maybe, because I want to experience. It's been a year and a half, 2 years that I walked into a fair now. See, we still have that same childlike enthusiasm. We still have the same energy. If you put me in a room of counselors today, I can still do the training as I've always done it. Right? So there's never a point in your career where you feel, okay, I've done this enough and now I don't want to do this.
And this is what I tell my team, and all my education friends, new age ICRs or uni reps, and so there are three kinds of ICRs and uni reps, what I define. They are someone who have slog it upway, probably someone like you, probably Jaspreet from Queen's Mary, Mrs. Dolan from KCL, so who have been Nilanjan from TCD, who have been there then doing it for 10 years, 15 years, and now they're so good, that most of the people probably enter those universities because of their face.
Correct.
Right? And then there are someone who are probably okay. Probably that generation probably have to evolve more technologically, content, personal branding, because they focus too much on doing the right thing and doing it over and over time, wherein probably they need more visibility. Probably, they deserve those stories which they have built up. Then there is a generation of uni reps which probably in the system for 5 to 10 years, and they have learned new age, and they're also learning the traditional way of representing university, right? And they're also doing good. And there's a new age, absolutely new, which have just entered, and lots of them are my friends.
The Gen Z,
Gen Alpha, Gen X, and many of them are amazing. There are few which I realized that probably they have entered for the wrong reasons. flights, 5 stars, fares, 5-star lunch, dinners, right? They join, and most of them also quit within 6-9 months because they realize it's everything than that. They realize that it's an industry wherein you can impact, break or make it people, careers, companies and whatnot.
See, there is a simple thing, Saurabh. India is an aspirational market, right? Every young student in this country somewhere aspires to study abroad. And that is why we see the rise of this industry. We see so many new entrants every year, entering this ecosystem. And when you're sitting with a young student at a recruitment fair, now that young student who perhaps has never left his country, has never traveled beyond say 500 kilometers of his residence, he's never seen what Australia looks like, he's never seen what the UK looks like. He sees the university, he sees the country through your eyes. And if you can show him what your country and what your university is, I feel you're doing justice to your job. It's a very simple analogy. See, people save money to buy luxury cars. You may have, or say watches. You're a fan of watches, so let's talk about watches. So you may save a part of your earnings for a number of years to buy a luxury watch from Switzerland. And that's your aspiration. That's something that you're working towards, something that you want. And the day comes when you think you now have enough.
Arrived,
You've arrived at that point, and you walk into the showroom. You're very close to buying that product, but it's your last interaction with that salesman who's representing that watch.
Right.
Now he can,
so true,
maybe he has the potential to make you buy that watch, or make you walk out of the shop without buying that watch also.
So true.
But however, now if at all you end up not buying that watch also, based on your interaction with that salesman, see, what has the company got to do with it? The company has built that legacy, that reputation over a century, making luxury watches, building the brand, and all that it took that representative of that brand 5 minutes to shatter that aspiration, to shatter that legacy that it took 100 years to build. And that is the role of a representative. And I understand, I totally echo and totally agree with you. It's a very glamorous role to be in, because people look at it from the external perspective of the outside of the role. Of course, I agree with you. There are flights and hotels and whatnot. However, I very recently put up a little post on LinkedIn where I spoke about, I call them weekend warriors. So I have a lot of representatives, representing various universities that we cater to. So I call them the weekend warriors because, Friday generally, when the world is prepping towards the weekend and making plans to go out for movies and clubbings and spending time with their friends and family, the representatives are generally, checking into their flights and packing their bags and traveling and hopping cities, hopping hotels, jumping from one place to another. And there are a lot of challenges, because very recently I was talking to one of my representatives who was stuck at an airport till 2 o'clock in the morning. The flight got delayed, didn't get back to home till 4 o'clock the next morning, had another fair to attend 11 o'clock the next morning. So these are challenges perhaps which are not told in the market. And these challenges need to be told at the time when I think companies like us are perhaps interviewing people. It's very important to set the expectations right. There are times when you have to sacrifice on your work-life balance, you have to sacrifice on your family time with your kids, time with your social circles, etc. Because you don't choose when you do what, because come Saturdays, come Sundays, come bank holidays, that's the time students want to come and meet you, and you've got to make yourself available. So that's why I call you a warrior, because a warrior is somebody who's always ready to go and fight. Right?
So true.
So they are my warriors, and I'm very, very proud. Not only my representatives, I think the entire industry, because we are one industry, we're one umbrella in the end of the day. And I think I've seen over the years people making these sacrifices, and it's not easy, because then people come back to us saying, "Arey, aap Hyderabad gaye honge, aap, you must have gone to Bangalore, you must have seen this, you must have gone to Delhi, you must have seen this." I would like to tell the audience, that is not the case. That is not the case, because generally when we travel out of a suitcase,
and
it's,
over the mobile.
and over the mobile is just from the airport to the hotel and back from the hotel to the airport and back onto the next airport. So that's how our life is.
Very true. In fact, when you talk about watch and sales, or a someone who is representing a company or a university or any brand, what are example, and what, weekend warriors, I will remember this for a long time, because not even weekend warriors, we are on a probably national holiday warriors also.
Correct.
I guess, for all my listeners, and I should not be saying it, but me being me, it's 2nd October. Supposedly it's a national holiday. Supposedly we should not be working. But I guess Jasminder took a early morning flight before he gets up. Before coming, I had a decent, discussion with my wife. And for the same reason, that it's 2nd October. Everyone is at home with family. Why are you going to record this podcast? And that's where the passion comes, And passion is not just one of the week, one of the month, I guess he's been doing that great because he's at it from last 15 years. Another thing which I was just thinking when you mentioned, it's accidentally that I've been interacting with all the market entries, companies and their founders. But good thing is all been there, done that.
Correct.
And now representing. So the pulse of what experience you have gone through when your flight got delayed at 2.
Correct.
And you need to ensure that that university rep, that ICR, your team member should be back at home safe.
Correct.
And should be fresh and ready for next morning.
Yep.
And if they are not ready, probably you will not shy away to go there. In fact, we are always eager to go.
Yep.
Because another thing in this industry, the more you talk to students, the more you talk to parents, the more you visit education partners, the more layers you will understand. And probably that's the reason you don't get bored. And another thing great about this study about industry is you're impacting a life. You're not selling something which is materialistic. You're not selling just dreams. You are selling experience. You are facilitating something which can make it or break it, the life of that student or that parent or that family. And in some cases, I've seen someone from a village who have gone abroad have changed and been exponential for that village or that town or that district.
Correct.
So much responsibilities. That doesn't mean that you don't need to enjoy, because in this industry, another thing good is that there are lots of events, there are lots of networking events, conferences. Learning is so much that you will never get bored of this industry, provided you are here for a while, provided you are here for the right reasons. Over to you, your journey, Jasminder. So from 2009 to 2011, you were as a teacher, you were part of a vocational. Then what happened after 2011?
I then moved on to supporting further education colleges, which are not universities, so they're sort of one step below the universities. And then I eventually...
What do you call it? Further education?
Further education.
Okay.
So it's, they import degrees from the higher education institutions and teach in those colleges. So you've got plenty of those in the UK. There was a time when Indian students...
Is it like Kaplan pathways?
No. So these are like... There's one that I worked, Birmingham Metropolitan College, there's Boneville College, a lot of them in the UK. So there was a time, in fact, back in the days when Indian students or international students could go and study in those colleges, because those colleges also had the license to recruit international students, which eventually was stopped once the government changed in 2010 and the PSW was discontinued in 2012. Eventually the licenses were taken away. A lot of them still have the license, but then they don't have the working rights, they don't have the post-study work rights. Hence students don't prefer to go into these further education.
What went wrong? Because I remember there are lots of, that 2020, 11, 12, especially in UK was in a very great year, because
Correct.
number plummeted.
Correct.
And again, there were, would love to hear, because you were part of the industry at that point in time.
So if you look at, so UK has always been a trendsetter, I believe. So the game started changing in 2005 when the Labour government in the UK introduced something called as IGS. Perhaps a lot of people in the industry today may not have heard of. People who have joined the industry today may not have heard of. It was called the International Graduate Scheme. This allowed the students, of course, to stay back in the country. It was nothing else but the post-study work visa. It was then retitled to post-study work visa in 2007 because IGS as a term was not very appealing enough to the international market. So they retitled it to post-study work visa. And it was the post-study work visa in 2007 which changed the game, and Indian numbers started skyrocketing. So numbers went up to about 45,000 in 2011. Now, if you look at 2005, maybe going 4 years back from 2009, around 138,000 Indian students left India to study abroad in that year. Now, from that 138,000, 76 of them alone went to the US, now which is 55% market share, which US has always dominated because of the large number of institutions, because of quality education, because of the favorable immigration policies, etc., the number of opportunities there. And then the 45% of the students that were left behind were then left in the pot for other countries to target, such as UK, Australia, Canada, New Zealand. Germany was emerging at that point. It was trying to get into the game. And even at that point, in 2005, Canada did more numbers than the UK. So the UK was third on the list. And that perhaps triggered the UK government to see how they can attract more students. Now, if you look at that situation, Saurabh, in 2005, there are 5 countries who are fighting for 55,000 students, because US walks away with 76,000 of them. And what you're fighting for, the 5 of you, the developed English-speaking countries with world-class institutions, they're all fighting for this 55,000 Indian students. Now, everybody wants these 55,000 students. And you then start introducing favorable immigration policies, schemes. You then start lowering your entry requirements. You start offering English language waivers and things like this to attract students. You want more and more students to come to your country. And it was then in 2007 when the UK government introduced the post-study work visa. They jumped from number 3 to number 2 because that's when the traffic diverted to the UK. More students starting to come to the UK. However, at that point, it wasn't just the universities. There were further education colleges that were recruiting international students. Along with that, there were private colleges which were also recruiting international students at perhaps 1/3 of the fees of what the universities were charging. And of course, India is a mixed market. There are people who chase quality education, but there are also people who chase, immigration. And the ones who were chasing immigration, for them, of course, these private colleges, further education institutions became more favorable choices because of the affordability factor. And that's when the game started getting a little shabby for the UK between 2007 to 2011. Although we had about 45,000 Indian students coming to the UK at that point, which is a decent number, and we had grown a market share in the Indian market. But then it wasn't the universities which were getting these numbers. These numbers were primarily going to the colleges, and colleges which in reality did not exist. These were colleges on papers. And I remember, because I lived in Birmingham for about 7 years after graduating, and if you took a walk around the city center of Birmingham, it's a pretty big, it's a huge city center. It's the second largest city of the UK.
It's the same place where we have a bull ring.
Correct. So you have the Bull Ring, and then you have the Corporation Street, and then you have so many places of commercial activities. It's a huge city center. And if you took a walk around the city center, about a mile and a half. So I did this with one of my friends when I was living in Birmingham, and we started counting the number of colleges because you had those fancy signboards in the building. And then we started counting colleges on our fingers, and we started walking. I don't think we finished the entire city center, and we had already counted about 45, 46 colleges on our fingers. And you have 45 colleges which are recruiting international students, and every college at that point probably must be recruiting about 100, 150 students. And when you try to find the college is not there. The college is not there, or probably it's functioning out of a little 2 BHK, right? And the signboard is bigger than the size of the institution sometimes. And that caught the attention of the government, because not that we didn't want the numbers. Of course, who doesn't like the numbers, because that gives you diversity, that gives you revenue, that gives you people who can come and contribute to research, etc. A number of benefits of attracting international students. However, the government realized that this is not going in the right direction, and it was very important for them to then change the dynamics of the higher education industry in the UK. And it was at that point when there were elections happening in the UK, 2010, and finally the Labour lost the power after being in power for about 10 years. And the Conservatives came in, and as expected, the first among the very things that among the very first few things that they did was discontinued the post-study work visa on the 6th of April 2012. Now, since then, within a year, our numbers dropped from 45,000 to 8,000. 8,500 students in, and that drop was just in one single academic year. And that's when the government then started introducing policies which forced a lot of private colleges to surrender themselves. Instead of going and shutting them down, the colleges started surrendering themselves. They just shut themselves, instead of the government doing anything to them. And it took them good 3 years to wipe all those colleges out of the system, to take away the recruitment rights from the further education colleges and restore the glory back with the higher education institution. And it was only in 2016 when the game looked a lot more cleaner. And that's when we thought the post-study work visa would be reintroduced. However, in 2016, as you probably may remember, something unusual, something very significant happened in the UK, and was the Brexit. And the reintroduction of post-study work visa took a backseat just when the industry was excited. Everybody was looking forward that the government's now achieved what they wanted to achieve in 4 years, because 2015 we had the next elections and the Conservatives re-won the election, so they were back in power again. But the reintroduction of post-study work visa never happened. Brexit took over everything. We got into Brexit. We then went into the clause 50, which is a cooling off period, 2 years. 2018 is when we officially walked out of the European Union. And it was not until 2019 the government decided to reintroduce the post-study work visa. And then what happened next was the pandemic. However, the beauty in the UK was it was the only country, it was the only destination which did not shut its borders even for a single day. It was open for education and business as usual. They did shut it for tourism for a little while. For business and education, it was always open. And then what happened next is nothing hidden from us. The numbers again skyrocketed. We saw 141,000 Indian students going back to the UK, and that's when the whole graph sort of reversed and started inclining again. Now, which is not a benchmark number, because again this was on the back of Australia and Canada, because their borders were shut. The students who had UK as a second or third choice had no other choice but to come to the UK. And then what happened, a lot of universities then started projecting the numbers for 22, 23, 23 based on the 2021 numbers or 2022 numbers, which ideally should not have been the case, because those were superficial numbers. They weren't organic numbers, as we call them. And hence we see a little decline, or I wouldn't call it a decline, I would say it's a correction, and a much needed correction in the numbers since then.
Absolutely. In fact, same. So I got in industry in 2011. Same. I remember UK that year was 40,000. You're mentioning 45,000, but 45,000. And the moment I entered this industry, I started from 8,000 base. But for me, I have not seen the history of UK or international students. But coming back to it, you mentioned 2005, there were 130,000 students from India. And if you see, we don't see any industry or many industry like this wherein there's a 10x growth.
Correct.
On a macros.
To 1.3 million now, in 20 years. 130,000
to 13 lakh students from India globally.
Correct.
This industry growing 5 to 6% Kalgar.
Correct.
And this is an industry wherein a particular student spends 50 to 70 lakhs a year. And due to which there are lots of investment-led companies. We'll talk that later.
Correct.
But why I'm mentioning this, that it's an industry which is stable. It's a sector which is sacred, as well as there's money, there's glamour. Only if you have been around for a while and navigate the cyclicality of this industry, because that will always be there.
Correct.
But the beauty is that you can always move from UK to Australia to Canada to New Zealand to what not, right? Or you go deeper into one country. Started probably with vocational further pathways, uni reps, probably market entries, probably vice chancellors, and we have seen there's so many vice chancellors from Indian origin.
Correct.
We know about Bobby in Portsmouth. Then we have
Lord Karan Billy, so Chancellor, University of Birmingham.
Typical success story.
Prime example.
How he created people who don't know him. He owned a brand called Cobra beer. Probably now you will recall. So again, Indian origin, Indian by heart, by nationality. came from Hyderabad, moved to UK, and started a beer company. And imagine our guy who's running a beer company is also a vice chancellor or even
Chancellor.
chancellor
He's a
of
chancellor.
a university, a public university. So that's the diversity and beauty about studying or staying in UK.
He's
So-
also the chair of the UK Parliamentary Committee for International Students, which is a very honorary position in itself to have. And he has been for a very, very long time, the spokesperson for and a big advocate to encourage international students in the UK.
Very interesting. Jasminder, you mentioned by 2026, 2016, when everything was getting, stable, and now, all the hard work you and the industry did to clean up the systems and again regain the glory, and you chose to come back to India. Go deep on that.
So my friends generally tell me you've got to be the stupid of the highest level to do that, because I was,
All founders stupid. All founders are, we have to be stupid.
I was very, very close to applying for my PR. I was eligible to apply for my PR
Yes.
because I'd been there 10 years, which sort of met the requirement for the PR. But then I always wonder, how did I even stay there for 10 years? Because when I went in 2006, my plan was not to stay in the UK for a very long time. I always wanted to come back, always wanted to be with the family here. Didn't realize how 10 years. I always tell people I went as a young pampered undergraduate student. I think I was 18 when I left India and came back as a father of a 6-month-old child. So from a young student to a
married
father, I got married in the UK. My wife is from Mumbai, so we Skype dated for a good 7 years before we got married, and it was a difficult era to date in. And that's because you didn't have the WhatsApps and FaceTimes and video calls, so we had to buy a calling card, if you remember, and you had to scratch the back of the calling card. You get a 16-digit number, and then you dial that number first, and then dial the number of the person you're trying to call.
60 rupees a minute call.
And the issue was, they would start charging you from the time the phone started ringing. Now, regardless of whether the person answers or not, you would be charged for that call from the time it starts ringing, right? And sometimes you would just end up spending that £5 without even talking to the person. And then it made you very frustrated, because at that point I used to work in McDonald's, I remember, as a part-time crew member, and what I earned, if I clearly remember, was £4.36 an hour. So that was my 1 hour worth of income, which went into a calling card without even talking to my my family. So it was very different time as compared to now when kids go. And I was very clear that I wanted to come back, but then I was constantly delaying, and I had started my business in the UK, where I was working very closely with the university, supporting them in transnational education opportunities, supporting them in articulation opportunities in India. But then when my son was born in 2016, that gave me the encouragement, that gave me the confidence to finally pack my bags, which something I was delaying for a very long time. And I said to my wife, maybe now is the time, because it's now or never, because once he gets into school, then it'll be very, very difficult for us to make our mind. And with a lot of reluctance from my wife, we finally we took the call, we took the decision. She was working for the NHS at that point, and not a job that you would want to leave in the UK. She was very settled, she was very happy. She had just come out of a maternity and was just about to rejoin her job. And that's when I said to her, let's call it a day in the UK and pack our bags and go back. And that was the year end of 2016 is when we finally returned to India.
But your connection to UK didn't end.
It never ended. So even see, if you ask my wife today, if you miss UK, even it's been 8 years that we're back, and now I have 2 kids. My daughter's born 2021, and she would probably want to go back on the next flight. And if you ask me now, I never, to be honest, I never realized that I relocated, because I got so busy with my work. As soon as I arrived in India, there was so much of travel, there was so much of ground building to do for the university.
Just to interrupt, so when you came back 2016, so how did you start again? What you started
So so I was briefly working with Cranfield in the UK, and that's when my then boss in Cranfield said, what if we gave you the opportunity to do what you're doing but from India? And I think it was a perfect coincidence, because I was looking for an opportunity which again kept me engaged with the industry, but then also gave me an opportunity to come back to India and carry on doing the same thing. So I still visit the UK a number of times in the year. I still talk to people in the UK every day. So if you ask me, I would never say I miss the place as much as my wife does, because and she was only there for 3 years after marriage, whereas I was there for 10 years. So when you've experienced everything, from your student journey to an employee to an entrepreneur in the UK, so you feel quite content that you've worn different hats, and and now you're back and you're still working with the same industry. So I never missed. Of course, there are things that I do miss, especially the food, which
chips and
fish and chips, and a lot of other things.
Round the corner bars.
Round the corner bars, and the amazing English pubs, and the drives to Snowdonia, the drives to Cumbria, Lake District, etc. Of course, you miss those things at times. But then, it's the same work, it's the same people that I'm working with today.
How the city, Cranfield? Because you were in Cranfield.
So you
studied for Wolverhampton, if I'm not wrong.
Studied in Wolverhampton.
Which is in around Birmingham.
It's very close to Birmingham.
Yeah. So you were always where there are lots of Indians.
Correct. There's a story behind
Punjabis
this.
And all.
There's a very interesting story behind this. So when I was applying to study in the UK, I had 4 offer letters. I had applied through an agency in Mumbai. And it was a dilemma to choose between the 4 universities, and like every other student, I was confused. Google was in its early days, so it didn't give you all the answers that you were looking for.
I mean, even till now.
It doesn't give you all the answers.
All my students and everyone that do research. I always say that have an informed decision. I mean, in fact, that's the reason we have created this study abroad buddy for international education. When people can search and then have a unbiased, because we are not in admission. So anyone can do, we can do.
Correct.
So we created that. But I always say that have an informed decision, do your research, but please go to have a direct connects with universities or your education partners, because they are doing it for, that's their profession, right? But also don't just rely on them. If you don't do your research, then don't say that you've been taken for granted because you've been lazy.
Correct.
So over to you.
And that happened with me. So I'm a prime example. So I was sitting on 4 offer letters.
Same me, but I will not mention about university.
I was contemplating, and I got a call from the agency, and they said the representative of one of those universities in the office, would you like to meet? And the young student, I got very excited, got ready, went to the office, and the representative of the university was sitting, gave me a nice, lovely presentation, the location, rankings, and everything else. And there was this one thing which he said outside the presentation. He said, "You'll have an amazing time in Wolverhampton." I said, "Why?" And he said, "There is massive Sikh community there." Not that it excited me, but then I went back home and I said to my mom that, I met the representative of the university, and he said, "There's massive Sikh community." Mom said, "Sochna hi nahi hai iske baad. You are going to Wolverhampton." And out of all the reasons to choose a university, that was my reason to choose the university because of the Asian community there, which beyond a point does not quite help you in your building your opportunities or building your career.
Also, as you mentioned, it's, okay, I did my undergrad from Delhi University, right? And I was very clear, top 5 university, top 5 college, 90 plus 90 plus 90 divided by 4, 90, and I only used to have only 5 names in the I was a topper in my school. It was second topper, 81, 82%. It was a bad year for the school. Then I realized, okay, there are college beyond North Campus, there are college beyond South Campus, and I studied on college with Krishna studies. But because I studied on Delhi University, because I studied a good course, that had not gone wasted.
Correct.
So similarly, again, the important study in the right education systems, and UK is one of the best education systems.
Absolutely, and absolutely no discredit. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed my undergraduate studies. The infrastructure, the teaching excellence, quality of the school that I was in was called the School of Applied Sciences, one of the best within the university, very top rank. They were absolutely amazing 3 years of my life. Made a lot of connections, made a lot of friends from across the borders, and some I would say the 3 most beautiful years of my life spent in Wolverhampton. And then I came to Birmingham, spent 7 years there before packing my bags and returning.
and then came to India, started your journey with Cranfield.
Correct.
We want to quickly talk about Cranfield. Then it would be great if you can talk more about Gresham, and also what is Gresham, why Gresham. It's a very unique name, and then what you do in Gresham, with probably differentiate.
It's so unique that every time I say Gresham, I have to spell it out to people.
I got it right. That's Gresham.
It's one of the challenges of having a unique name. Starting with Cranfield, your first question. So Cranfield, maybe I can sum up in a couple of statements. Two things that make Cranfield absolutely stand out. One is the fact that it's an exclusively postgraduate university, and if I have to rephrase myself, it's a university where the minimum age is 2021. So it's not one of those universities where you have masses of undergraduate students, teenagers, very, very glorious social life, etc. It's a very quiet, mature university that a very different environment that a lot of students perhaps may not have experienced in their undergraduate days. And second, the fact that it's a highly specialist university. It's not someone who teaches you a broad range of subjects from anthropology to zoology and everything in between. So it's a very specialist university, specializing in wide range of courses in what they understand the best, which is technology and management, because they build on the foundation of technology. The first subject they started teaching was aerospace in 1946, born out of an Air Force station.
I guess if I'm not wrong, Cranfield is one of the only city where you have, or a university which got their own.
They've got their own, they've got their own private airport as a university. They've also got their aircrafts, got a digital ATC as well, the first airport in the UK to do so. So very renowned in aerospace, but nevertheless equally popular in other subjects as well that they teach. And quickly jumping on to why Gresham, I think it was in 2021, we were all amidst the pandemic, we were all locked into our houses, and that's when I was sitting with my brother one day, and we were sort of talking about life, careers, couple of drinks down, and typical Punjabi house.
Couple of Punjabi drinks
down, and then we were thinking, what next? And that's when, looking back at all the years that I had spent, I thought, why not leverage my experience, my connections, my contacts, my knowledge of the industry to benefit more than one university. And every university has its own offering, it has its own strengths. I don't really see conflicts between universities. I think India is one of those markets where everybody has enough to capture if you know the right way and if you know the right areas to tap. So that gave me the encouragement to go back to Cranfield and ask the question that they're okay for me to do that. And thankfully Cranfield was quite supportive and quite encouraging. My bosses were quite encouraging and said, why not? You've spent a long time with Cranfield, so long as our reputation is sort of maintained, we don't mind you chasing your ambition. And thanks to that encouragement, thanks to the blessings of my bosses in Cranfield, I took the next step with my brother and formed Gresham Global. I think
your brother is also involved.
My brother is my partner in the business, and so it was all happening. I think it was Diwali time, October 2021 is when we sat, and the next question was, what do we call it? And just a month before all this was happening, my daughter was born, September 21. So she was born in the pandemic.
What date?
11th of September.
Okay, so mine is 20th September.
20th September. So 2021, 11th of September, my daughter was born. A very, very difficult maternity, paternity period that we both had. And then the question was, what do we name this? And then we both sort of coincidentally came up with the same, like, let's call it Gresham, because my daughter's name is Gresham.
So your wife also mentioned the same thing?
My brother. So my brother said, let's name it after her, because maybe she's come to our family and maybe she's brought this new energy, she's brought this vibe which has given us the confidence to take the next step in our careers.
But why Gresham? It's a very, what does it mean?
So Gresham, there's again a history. So it was a name that I fell in love with when I was in the UK. It's a very old English name, perhaps not something that you'll hear today. Maybe it's an outdated name in the English world, hence maybe parents don't name their kids as Gresham today, but it's a very old name. And there are a lot of organizations, institutions, a lot of buildings named after Gresham because people were called Gresham once upon a time in England. It also has meanings in Sanskrit, Hindi, Latin, a lot of other languages. So Gresham technically means the monsoon just before the summer. or maybe in some other languages it's called greenery, some languages called the grass, it's called it's a synonym for
New era.
new era or
New.
a change or something that's positive. And I first came across this name in 2011. And keep in mind, my daughter was born in 2021. So when we were expecting our first child in 2016 in the UK, we so wanted a daughter. And I wanted a daughter for a different reason, because I wanted to name her Gresham, because that was a name that I was carrying in my mind for 5 years, and that I want a daughter so that I can call her Gresham. And then we had a son, and he's a beautiful child.
What do you call him?
His name is Arjun.
Arjun.
And then we waited, and came 2021, and then we had second child, and again we were very, very desperate for a daughter, because in the UK you can identify the gender.
Yeah.
And then we very soon found out that
So even
it was a
during
son.
that time, you got a beating from your wife. See, I told you, you must have been in UK. You would have known. I'm sure.
So 2021, finally we welcomed our daughter. And what happened in the hospital, so the nurse came the next morning. My daughter was born in the evening, so she came to us the next morning with a municipal council
Name,
registration, birth certificate registration form. And she left the name section blank, and she wrote the surname. She wrote Khanna, but then she left the name blank. And I said, why have you left that blank? And she said, sir, wo aap mein 13 day pe naam rakhte hain, so I've left that blank. I said, you write Gresham. I'm carrying that name in my mind for 10 years now. You better write Gresham, because I wanted a daughter so that I could name her Gresham. And finally Gresham came, and then she was so auspicious to us that we named the company after her. So it's called Gresham Global.
So beautiful. That is so relatable. I have my story, but I know we have a flight to catch. So, some other day. But you mentioned that, Gresham, it's a beginning or a change. So what do you want to change in this ecosystem, which has already been happening? What do you want to change from Gresham?
Change wise, there is a lot of scope to change how this industry is represented, how universities are represented. And we've all been long enough in the industry to realize that there are still enough gaps, whether it's on the agency side, it's on the representation side, it's in the ancillary services, etc. And I don't think I can do it alone. I don't think there's something that we can address overnight. I think we all have to come together. And I very recently wrote another article for the Pie, where I spoke about why this industry needs a consortium, why this industry needs a body that unifies us. Because for all these years, we've been here for 35 years as an industry, and in all these 35 years, one thing that we don't have is a body that unites us. We don't have an association. We don't have a platform where we can come together, raise our voices, and talk about things that should not happen in the industry, or things can get
Best
better in the industry, best practices, etc. So I wrote about this very recently, and I also found out that there's some work happening in the background. So there is something in progress. Hopefully we'll hear about it soon.
We'd love to be part of this, because I believe it's high time that we have bodies wherein the best practices and bad actors should be called out.
Correct.
Even this industry been quite infamous for some wrong practices.
Correct.
Like poaching and
Correct.
mis-selling to some
Correct.
less privileged students.
Absolutely.
or segment.
So I think there are gaps that need to be addressed. It will take some time, and I think what is very, very important for us to do is come together as an industry, regardless of what we do, how we do, how big, how small we are. We all need to come together, because whilst the experienced can bring in their experience, I think that the younger players can bring in their creativity. They can bring in fresh minds, fresh energy on the table, and together I think we can achieve the changes that we all aspire to bring in this industry today.
I want to ask my last question, probably before we do part 2, or some other day. Because you have gone through to UK, from Mumbai, and then you have stayed in a city which already got a community which you relate to, and then you came back and you've been traveling the world. You've been not only doing Indian students, you're doing South Asian students.
Correct.
There's also cultural diversity which I can sense you have gone through. How important is cultural sensitivity for international education, for students and for universities?
I think cultural sensitivity is important on both sides. I think more than us, it's important for the universities to understand the cultural gaps, the cultural differences. I can maybe give you a very, very small example that comes to my mind when we talk of cultural sensitivities. When I was in Cranfield in 2017, we wanted to partner with a university in India, which is apparently to date India's best private engineering university. Very, very renowned, very high standards of teaching.
You want to name?
Vellore Institute of Technology in Vellore, Tamil Nadu.
Okay.
So we wanted to, and I went back, I built a business case, I submitted to the due diligence team in Cranfield, and there was a due diligence process. They would go and do the checks on the university, and it took them 4 weeks to come back to me and tell me that we can't partner with this university, which was an absolute shocker to me. Because
why?
I'll tell you why. Because what happened, the due diligence team, as everybody else would do, they went on the search engines and started doing their checks, and came across an article that was published back in the days, which spoke about the female students in that university not being allowed to leave their hostel, leave their accommodation after a certain point in the evening. And when I found out the reason, it sort of made me laugh, because it's a very cultural thing in India to do that, and that's in the interest of the safety of female students. Because Vellore, again, it's a tier 3 city, it's a smaller town, and it's not just Vellore, it's everywhere else. And then I really had no idea as to how do I fix this now, because and then I went back to a professor of Indian origin who was teaching at Cranfield at a very prominent position. He was head of one of the departments in Cranfield. He was there for a very, very long time, and I went to him and I said, "Sir, I need your help." He said, "How can I help you?" And I said, "Sir, I'm stuck with this, because the university is looking at this as a discrimination, whereas I don't know how to explain them, but this is Indian culture. This is Indian culture." And he said, "Jasminder, don't worry, I'll step into this." And then he intervened into the matter and rescued me out. And then finally that association came through, that MOU was eventually signed, and then we're still partners with them. But then, talking of cultural diversities, cultural gaps, I think it's very important to understand from both sides, and not conclude and not judge somebody on the basis of something that's practiced in some part of the world.
Interesting. With 30 years of experience in the industry, there's so much of stories, anecdotes, examples we can quote. I'm wary about your flight, and probably we have so many questions with my team shared, but I have not asked. I
promise I'll come back.
Yeah, so we'll do it again.
Sure.
And without just to wrap it up. Thank you so much. For opening your heart. You're sharing your own stories, and I will remember Gresham.
Thank you.
And Gresham is here to change. And not only change things, but also bring together people.
Correct.
Because totally with you. This is an era of collaborations, not competition.
Correct.
There's enough pie for all of us.
There is enough pie. That's what I believe in.
To build and scale the industry and make it more sustainable.
Correct.
Then becoming another e-commerce or any industry which is just quoting on price, just quoting on probably intangible aspect, then a tangible output.
Correct.
So we as an ecosystem need to come together and ensure that India talent should be recognized. And it's not only UK. There are so many developing and emerging universities in Europe which is on the cusp of Indian. Everyone is looking in Indian talent. Everyone is attracting Indian talent. So it's high time that we all up the game and come together and make it big.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you agree with this, and let's do this together. So,
Jasminder, as you studied in Wolverhampton, and spend lots of time in UK, what was your journey of finding accommodation? You did your undergrad, so you must have been on campus in the first year and then look out. So how was your experience of accommodation, finding accommodation and staying out there?
I would say I didn't have an experience, because fortunately I had a cousin who was in Birmingham when I was traveling to study. And then of course, when you have a relative, when you have somebody who's already living there, your parents would always want you to spend at least some time with them. And of course, it was a different era, like I said, almost 20 years ago, when we didn't have accommodation providers as organized as yourself today. And accommodation wasn't a key priority. Most students knew people who lived in the UK. 9 out of 10 times you would know somebody who's living in the place where you're going. And that was also a reason for people to choose universities back in the days, because a lot of parents or a lot of students would go to the agent and say, I want to study here just because I know somebody and I can stay with them, and that make my life a little easier, not necessarily just from financial perspective, but again safety and comfort as well, which is not the factor anymore, because students are a lot more independent. They want to stay away, they want to develop their skills. So 20 years ago when I went, I had somebody who was staying there, and then spent some time with them, then moved out closer to my university, because traveling from Birmingham to Wolverhampton wasn't a very easy task, especially coming back from Wolverhampton, because it's a smaller city back in the days as compared to Birmingham, which is a much bigger city. So there were restrictions on public transport, etc., especially after 6 o'clock in the evening and the weekends. And then I decided to move closer to my university, and then we moved into a private accommodation, and then realized that there were too many distractions as I was getting closer to my final year of my studies, which had a 6-month long project, which was very intense. Of course, biotechnology being biotechnology, you've got to spend a lot of time in the labs doing your practicals, a lot of self-study assignments, dissertation, and of course the modules that you have to attend on the day-to-day basis. And then I realized that it was important for me to be in the university accommodation, to be closer to my lecture theatres, to be closer to my academics, closer to my peers, my colleagues, where I can spend more time with them, in devoting myself to my course rather than traveling and spending that time on the road. And eventually then I moved into my university accommodation. Now generally it's the other way around. You see people moving into student university accommodation in the beginning and then moving out. For me it was the other way around. I moved into the university accommodation in the last year.
Very interesting. But things have changed, right? And you mentioned that, and even though you stayed with relatives, but eventually move out closer.
Yes.
So what is your suggestion for all those Indian international students who generally, not many students now prefer a city or a university basis relatives, because we all need to understand that life have changed.
Correct.
It has become very, very fast paced.
Absolutely.
All our relatives, all are known, they already have a families.
Correct.
And then they also work, both the partners are working.
Correct.
And unlike in India, you have time and support and help. Yeah. The houses are bigger.
Absolutely.
Out there the houses are getting smaller. They are getting more busier, right? And even when I went, so I didn't get my housing, because I went for exchange program. No one told me that there will be no accommodation. I didn't ask. I went there. I didn't get it. So I stayed on campus for two nights. There was no duvet. There was no pillow. At least 10,000 times I have realized. I was thinking that let me come back. Imagine if I would have come back. This must have not been happening for sure.
Correct.
Right? But I thought I am an exception. Off lately, one of my CFO Manoj, his daughter went to Sydney, and like we've been doing, we are the pioneer and whatnot. People say,
correct.
We couldn't able to find accommodation for her daughter. It was very embarrassing, But then we realized why that happened. People were waiting for university halls to come back and confirm.
Correct.
And when they don't get accommodation in university hall, then they look outside. So
correct.
What we suggest that start early, look beyond university halls, and apply to university halls, but don't be dependent on university halls. Because if you're undergrad first year, still there's you will get something. That something might be same gender without different gender. It can be on-suite, non-on-suite. That is a different thing. But 80% of students from India or abroad are postgrad students. They're not guaranteed accommodation.
Correct.
So these are the things, which we also realize over a period of time, right? So what do you suggest or share to your students and agents and ecosystem how one should go about post-admission, especially housing and any other services which probably...
There are plenty of services, and I think a lot of these services that the students are not aware. We're sitting in Delhi, so perhaps not a good example to use, but in Mumbai, you may be aware of the amazing local train networks that running up and down all day in Mumbai, which is called the lifeline of Mumbai. There's a very famous route in Mumbai which is called Churchgate to Virar, the fast local. So it stops at very limited stations on the way. And generally, I use this analogy when I'm talking to students, parents, my partners, associates in the industry. And I tell them, you are at Virar and the university is Churchgate. And there are some very critical junctions on the way to the university where you must stop and you must very carefully consider each of those junctions. Now, what are these junctions? Of course, very, very essential is your accommodation, which plays a very important role, and it has a huge reflection on your overall performance as a student in that university, and subsequently on your employment opportunities, your career opportunities. And sometimes we may be very naive to ignore or not understand the importance of having a good accommodation. And it's not enough that you can stress about it, because you can't influence choices.
Yeah.
But I think it's a very, very, very critical decision in studying abroad as to where you're going to stay. And again, you may have the option to stay with relatives, you may have the options to share rooms with your friends, save cost, etc. But then what you're doing in the process of doing that is inevitably and unknowingly jeopardizing your career opportunities, your performance, your academic performance in the university and all of that. The next very important thing is banking, because see, studying abroad is a lot more expensive than what it was back in the days.
For sure.
You're looking at very high undergraduate fees, which of course gets multiplied by 3 or 4 depending on where you're going, and you've got living cost, accommodation, food, travel, mobile bills, etc. And a lot of these undergraduate students are dependent on parents to fund them, at least for the beginning phase of their journey. And there's a lot of to and fro of money happening between the two countries, and people sometimes do not perhaps not aware of how they can, or what services can they use, how can they wisely manage the flow of money, to be able to, one, keep the money secure at all times, and second, maybe save a little bit of money by using the right channels. And that is why it is very important to get in touch with forex specialists who can help you understand how can you transfer, when is a good time to transfer, how much can you transfer. So that education is very important. There's one very beautiful service that I came across, one of the global banks is offering. So the bank is in the UK, the bank is in India, and I found this out very recently, that you can actually open a bank account in the country where you're traveling even before you get there, at the convenience of your doorstep in your country. Now, of course, these services weren't available when we were studying. So we had to go to the registry office, get an account opening letter, one addressed to Lloyd's TSB, one addressed to HSBC, get in the queues, because September is a time when there's a flood of students entering the country, and then there are long waiting times for the bank account opening appointments. You go back again, submit your documents, you sit with your relationship manager for the flurry of signatures, etc., etc. Then the debit card would arrive at your address. Now, what they've done is they've cut short all the hassle. They open your bank account in India before you fly, and it's such a beautiful service to have. Again, we talk about it's an optional service, but I don't see why one must not avail it. There are food nutritionists available in the market today that specifically focus on students who are studying abroad, because what happens more often than not is, when we travel abroad as a young 17, 18, or even a postgraduate 20-year-old student, we're very young, and suddenly you get the financial independence, the social independence, the parents are not around, and you have that liberty to start doing things. You experience the new world, and sometimes you get carried away with your lifestyle, with your eating habits. You sort of can't differentiate between the do's and the don'ts, and that somewhere starts reflecting on your health. And when that starts reflecting on your health, it has some very sort of irreparable consequences as well, again reflecting on your studies, reflecting on your opportunities in the future and all of that. So all these services put together, from accommodation to forex to banking. Now, there's another company that I came across very recently, and again, it's a very noble service. It's a commercial service, but I still call it very noble, because what they do is they diagnose the student before the student flies, a young 18-year-old student. They would do a number of blood tests, etc. on the student, of course, with the consent of the family. And then based on your diagnosis, they curate a medical kit for you. It's a very bespoke medical kit. It's not a standard generic kit. So this has all the important medications, supplements, everything that you require based on your profile, which you carry and keep with you for at least 2 years, because they have longer expiry dates, because all the fresh medicines. And if at all you need a doctor, you need health advice, you want to talk to a doctor, you don't have to get in the queues getting an appointment with the NHS, or you don't have to spend a lot of money in the, if you're in the US, for example. Every country has its own healthcare challenges, medical challenges, as we call them. This company here in India provides you on-call consultation 24/7. So all the student has to do on the click of a button, they can get a doctor on the screen, talk to the doctor, explain the symptoms, talk to them how they're feeling, etc. And all the doctor will do is like, open your kit, get this medicine out, have it, you'll be all right. Right? Saves you the hassle
And
of
the
getting
peace of
out of your room, right? Especially in the winters.
It's so expensive there. It's peace of mind.
Absolutely. So these are very important services that the parents must be aware of, the students must be aware of, and this makes your journey not only easier, but it makes your time in the UK a lot more productive.
Yes.
A lot more
Totally
productive,
agree.
and
Totally agree.
it definitely gives you an edge over everybody else in that system. So
Totally
I think
agree.
what you're doing, Saurabh, as well, it's an amazing job, because like I said, these services weren't available before, and students have made choices, they've burned their fingers, they've made the wrong decisions, they've gone there, realized that I shouldn't have done that. Can I now move into a better accommodation? And then that education, when people say, I think it's cheaper for me to share a house rather than going into a
Specialized
PBS
accommodation,
or a university accommodation, but then there's nobody telling them that what you're looking on the website is just the rent, because that will not include your utilities, and then when you add everything up together, what you're saving is a very marginal amount, which isn't worth, given what you're there for, the objective that you're trying to achieve when you're in that country. And that education again is very important to spread and make people aware that how critical these little junctions from Virat to Churchgate are.
So for me, my podcast is done. Because see, I am passionate about not student booking through us. I'm not passionate about that we make money. We are making money. But if ecosystem, you have to start talking about accommodation.
Yep.
The purpose of starting this web series podcast is sorted, because I realized that because they're very less margins, their volume, but they're less margins. It's a tough business.
Correct.
Right? Not many companies sustain.
Correct.
Right? But people need to talk about, and we take a little bit of credit of changing the ecosystem on post admission, because I remember when I started back in 2011, people used to come to us in August, September. मेरा visa आ गया, अब मुझे accommodation करनी है. Exactly. But when a student going for the first time, the logic is once I get visa, then only apply accommodation, because university also says that.
Correct.
Everyone want to play safe. University also says, and all the agents also says that don't book your air tickets till time you don't get visa.
Correct.
Don't book your accommodation till time you don't get your visa. I'm not saying that's wrong, but understand the repercussion of the same.
Correct.
If you book your air and interestingly, people still not shy away to book air tickets 6 months back, earlier, to save the 5,000-10,000 rupees.
Correct.
Because when you cancel, probably you will have 5,000-10,000 of
very nominal cancellation
charges, but you save at least 30,000-40,000 if it have not increased. But on housing, where you spend 20 to 30% of even 40% of overspend, you shy away to book.
And you spend 3 years. Your flight is only 9 hours.
In fact, for me, I'm the as a Western Indian, I'm very passionate about this. All the soulmates, roommates, business partners, your networking, everything happens on the halls and accommodation.
Absolutely.
In classes,
there's no denial.
In classes,
I'll tell you another important factor here. You see, I'm not saying that the course that you're going for is not available in India. Perhaps that same course is available in India today at 1/10 of the price, maybe, and at very convenient, maybe 5 kilometers from where you're living. Why are you going abroad? The most important reason, the most important factor here is internationalization, and this is one area where I've seen Indian students not leveraging the opportunity enough, not taking advantage of the opportunity enough in internationalizing their experience when they're abroad, because we want to be in our comfort zone, we want to be around our families, we want to be around people that we can speak in the local language. And I say this from my own example, because my first 2 years I spent with people that I was comfortable with, whether it was friend, family, we had a shared accommodation. I first lived with my cousin, which gave me a lot of comfort in terms of cooking, because you're cooking the same thing, you can share, you can split responsibilities, etc. When I moved into the halls of residence in the final year, we were a big group. We were, I think, about 18-19 of us in our little block. And then what we used to do is every Friday we used to have a theme party, right? And it was a different theme, and the theme was based on different cultures, different nationalities. And we took turns one after the other to organize these parties. So for example, if there were, I think it was three of us, three Indians in a group of 18, and there were like a lot of other nationalities across Europe and outside Europe as well. And when it was our turn, then we would cook Indian food, and then put the room up nicely, then Indian theme, etc., and all of that. And then other people would take turn, when it's their turn, and do the same thing. And that gave us so much exposure, that gave us so much knowledge of different cultures, diversity, etc. And then I realized that I should have come here a lot earlier, and had not waited till the final year of my studies to come into the halls.
And it's so common sense. I mean, I'll give you an example, right? Let's say I apply for a role, and I get to know that the founder of that company is Chinese. And if you can speak 2 lines of Chinese and break the ice, or you can talk about the purpose of what is New Moon Day, or how when they celebrate their New Year.
Correct.
It changes.
Absolutely.
It changes the dynamic altogether.
Yep.
So, and for that, totally right you are. Wherein if you're going abroad, please don't stick with Indians or Chinese. And I'll give you another analogy. Why British students or US students are more easy to get jobs and even dates, because they don't shy away.
Correct.
In their culture, staying out of their home, out of their city, on their own.
It's a part of their culture where a 16-year kid is encouraged to choose a university away from home.
Yes.
Even if you have the best university in the country in your own city, you're still encouraged to look beyond that university. And these are some of the things which quite surprised me when I was new in the UK. That why would you do that? Why would you send a 16-year-old kid away? And why would you ask a 16-year-old to contribute to the household, start earning, start working part-time, etc. But then the more time that I spend in the country, I realized that how important these things are, and how that they nurture and shape you up into what you're trying to become.
Absolutely.
And it's so very important for us to get inspired from these things, learn from our mistakes. And if you're truly meaning to internationalize your learning experience and spend 10 times the cost against something that's available in your own country, then let's do that, right? It's so very important for us.
So what I am taking from you, and probably I'll keep for my daughter also, it's not about the degrees. It's not about the rankings. They are important.
Correct.
But that should not be the only factor for choosing that city, that university, that course.
Correct.
And that's where, when you're going abroad or taking that uncomfortable journey and even the financial risk and staying away from family, don't be introvert. Even if you're introvert, try to be ambivert, because then you will not able to get the full ROI. And even if you want to come back and join your parents' business, right? In fact, I always say that don't go for immigration only.
Correct.
That's a byproduct. Don't go for post-study visa. That's a byproduct. In fact, years when there's a consolidation, or there is there is probably a bit more stringent policies, I encourage all my students to go in that year. It's like you will get less competition.
Absolutely.
Jobs will be easily available comparatively. Your housing will be cheaper, or probably more options. So I'm a contrarian. Whenever people say that market is down, I get let's invest. Whenever people say crypto will not work, I'm like, this is the right way.
It's exactly what happened in COVID. I remember the world was shut and we were limited to 13-inch, 15-inch screens. And all we did in those 2 years is talk to thumbnails on the screen. Sometimes you could see the faces, sometimes you could not see the faces. And of course, there was a lot of uncertainty in the market. COVID was new to all of us. None of us had seen it before. We didn't know the answers to a lot of questions when students ask you, is this a good time to travel? What if something happens to me there? What if my university suddenly stops teaching me and I'm locked in a room, and we go from offline to online teaching? What if this happens, and what if that happens? And one thing that I always tell my students, if ifs and buts for pots and pans, there would be no job for the tinker. And I honestly told them all that time is, see, I don't have answers to your question. I honestly don't have, because this is new to me as much as it is to you. However, I will break your questions down and I'll answer them one by one. So your first question is, what if something happens to me? Does that mean that it cannot happen to you in India?
Yeah.
Right? Now you are 18, 19 or maybe 20, 21, right, today. Now looking at the data that we have from the pandemic, how likely are you to be affected by that virus, right? We had that data and we knew that the virus was affecting the older generation a lot more than the younger ones, because they're a lot more fitter and to fight the virus.
Immunity was strong.
Correct. And I said to them, you do your own analysis. The data is right in front of you. We've been a year in COVID now. How likely are you to be affected? What will happen to even if you're affected? Second question is, my parents won't be there. And then my simple response is, what if your parents are even there with you? They can't even get in that room where you are. They can't even get you your food in that room because they can't be in close proximity to you because it's an infectious virus. What if I need treatment or I need to be hospitalized? Simple comparison. Where do you think you'll be better treated and where do you think you'll save money? Because I very clearly remember my mom was admitted, so I won't go too far, and I ended up paying a bill of 8.5 lakhs for 12 days that she was admitted, whereas UK has a better medical welfare system where you pay one of IHS and everything else is taken care of, right? So you'll be better off, if at all. I'm not saying that you will need hospitalization, but if at all you do need, I think you'll be taken better care of there. So I think the students need to break these uncertainties down and look at it very analytically to understand the pros and cons. And on the flip side, I went back to them and said, now imagine if you're going to the UK in all these uncertainties, hospitalization, mom and dad not there, something happens to me, my university stops teaching, whatever. Now imagine you go there, you take the brave decision. You are absolutely highly advantaged because you're going at a time when we have the least number of students come into the UK. You get the best scholarships. You get the best proximity to your academics because it'll be smaller class sizes, smaller ratios. You get the best accommodation in the country, which is generally not available after a certain point in the year because it's all gone. And to top it all up, you will have the best employment opportunities because there'll be lesser competition in the market when you eventually graduate from the university. People realizing that nothing happened to me.
That's what happened. I have students which, so when COVID happened, right? So again, you guys are still very close to universities and you know what's happening inside, what the policies. And we are the first one to start all this flood of pandemic of webinars and seminars because we were clueless.
Correct.
Like, I don't know what happened.
Correct.
Let's talk from people who knows. And that's why we started webinars and So one thing or another, I always say that we are the first one in industry to do lots of things, including podcasts. I'm sure many of our peer group will start podcasts soon. But the advantage of starting early is that you're making mistakes. But the leverage is so high. So what we realized that during that time, the entry levels was low, even the lowest ever. Due to which, even if you have never could have studied in best of the universities, beyond your limits, you got few of the students studied there.
Absolutely.
Right? And when pandemic happened and it got subsidized, they got such good jobs. People were ready to pay 10, 12, 14, 15 dollar an hour. We paid that. Sitting from here, we hired people on the ground and paid 15 pounds an hour because we need people and we need skilled people. Right? So definitely, whenever, and same now, there is a consolidation happening.
Correct.
Right? But then if you see, it's good for the ecosystem because yes, actually I personally have opinionated about dependent visa. I'm not a big supporter of dependent visa. Yes, there are cases if you're going for PhD, shifting fellowship, if you're going to add value to that ecosystem.
Correct.
Definitely you should be welcome. But if you have been sent and told that okay, you go there and take your spouse and kids and you will get settled, that's a wrong expectation.
Absolutely.
And even students should not buy for it because nothing is free.
See, I totally agree with what you said, and I don't think the ban on dependents really affected the Indian market as much because if you break the numbers down again, in the year when the ban was implemented, we had 124,000 Indian students go to the UK, of which only 24,000 students went with their dependents. So our ratio was 20%, which was much lower as compared to some of the other countries in Africa, Middle East, etc., which had a very, very high ratio of dependents traveling with the student. However, now if you again analyze this further, I did make a point on LinkedIn. I think this was 3 years ago. I did put up a post. See, there are triple accredited business school or quadruple accredited business schools now. So Cranfield's one of the quadruple accredited business schools.
Go deeper. What is quadruple about? Aggregated and quadruple aggregated or triple
So
aggregated?
there are various accreditations that you achieve as a business school. So generally, most universities in the UK most business schools in the UK would have 3. Cranfield's just achieved their 4th one, which makes it very prestigious, even more prestigious in the market. So if you look at the students who are coming to the prestigious, the triple accredited or the quadruple accredited business schools, they're generally a lot more mature in their age, because if you're teaching an AMBA accredited MBA, then you would very, very likely have a requirement for work experience, which is generally between 3 to 5 years. And if a student's coming to you at the age of 26, 27, 28 or even older, it's quite likely the student may have dependent or dependents at that age. But then if you look at that student more closely now, he's coming to a triple accredited business school. He's coming with deep pockets. He's bringing 40, 50,000 pounds, because the MBAs that we're talking about are not the usual MBAs. These are slightly for the deeper pocket ones. And he's coming with 3 to 5 years of managerial experience that is bringing into the country. He's bringing diversity, he's bringing revenue. It's quite likely that this person may go on to work in the economy, contribute to the economy. He may even go on to create jobs in that country. And what you're doing by implementing a blanket ban on dependents is you're then shutting the door on students like these from coming to the UK. And that is somewhere inevitably affecting our economy, affecting job creations, affecting talent, or maybe contribution to research in the country. So whilst I agree with the ban on dependents, I don't think it should have been done blanketly, and it should have been looked more analytically to see what we want to ban and what we don't want to ban.
Which segment of location they can ban.
Correct. Or maybe you look at the triple accredited business schools and then exclude them from this policy, etc. So I think a lot of the decisions that are historically taken by governments are taken in such manner, and that is one thing that I think can change, because again the decisions are not taken by universities, by educators. They're mostly taken by politicians who may or may not understand the nitty-gritties and the consequences of such decisions as well.
So let me have some fun, right? Let's have a rapid fire round.
Sure.
Yeah. Not a coffee with Karan, there are no hampers, but so you have worked as an ICR for good 4 or 5 years, and now you are managing lots of uni reps and ICR. So ICR or market entry founder?
I think depends on the day. If given a choice, I would still be an ICR on Sundays.
Yes, there's 0 and 1. There's no grey answer here.
I would be Gresham. I think that way I get to work with more universities and benefit more universities, support a lot more people in the industry.
Okay. So Gresham. Okay. Interacting with students or interacting with agents?
Students.
You play safe.
Students.
Okay. India or UK?
India. Difficult one, but India.
India. Mumbai or Birmingham?
Mumbai, hands down.
Mumbai.
That was easy.
Ajay, Mumbai also, I heard that it's like a cancer. Once you get it, you get it. I have a few friends who stayed in Mumbai, and they're from my hometown, and they stayed 10 years in Delhi, but 2 years in Mumbai. And if you ask which is the better, they're like Mumbai. I'm like, 2 saal rahe wahan pe.
It's cancer in true sense, because the cost of the city also kills you.
But still Mumbai. Okay. Nice. Watches or bikes?
Bikes I'm not allowed, so watches.
Traveling or sitting on the desk?
Traveling. Any day.
Traveling.
2nd of October, I'm here.
Is it because of your role so far? Because you've been working and traveling so much that now, if you don't travel, you feel like I'm not working?
Is that the feel? You feel FOMO. You miss.
But then, okay, so I have traveled last 2 years like crazy. And my schedule is starting from 5th October, and then I am leaving out a suitcase. Right? But I I love travel. I hate travel. Right now, last 6 months I've not traveled. And I like why I'm traveling. You do, at least I'm doing more without traveling.
You're more productive when you're not traveling. I do agree with you, but then see, in India it's a vast geography, and I must say that I'm a little old school where I still prefer to go out, shake hands, exchange cards, have coffees with people, because I'm not a big fan of the virtual world. We had to do it a couple of years, had no choice, but then I'm happy that we've come out of it, and I like meeting people.
I agree. I guess that's why we are pursuing this field wherein we love to meet people. We love to go on the ground, see the reality.
Correct.
Because there are so many agents in companies which looks amazing on virtually.
Yep.
But you go and meet in person, it's a different ballgame.
And the beauty is, Saurabh, that although we've all been here long enough, but then if you look at it, there's so much that we still don't know. There's so much that we're still exploring every single day, because I tell this to my partner universities as well. As like, India is not one country. India is 28 countries within a country. Every 200 kilometers, everything's pretty much changing. What you're wearing, what you're eating, your mindset, your subject choices, everything is changing. And I can still not confidently say, even after 15 years, that I understand this market or I know enough about this industry, because it's ever evolving. There is never a dull moment. There's so much always changing here, and that always keeps you so excited, on your toes, and that keeps you on the road as well, because you want to meet as many people as you can.
So your advice to anyone who want to apply to Gresham, who want to start their career as a university rep? I know you've been giving lots of opportunity to new talent, right? And then your advice to students and to your education partners.
I think for university reps, yeah, like I said before, it may look very glamorous, but then you've got to be ready to don the uniform, become a warrior, pick up the ammunition, which is tablecloth, standees, your prospectors, and then just go out on the road. And you've got to build the visibility. You've got to really build the product that you own. It's like your own baby, and unless you don't have the passion for it, I would say reconsider your choices, because it's not as easy as it looks from the outside. Yes, there are perks of being the ICRs. You get a lot of respect in the market. You represent universities, some very iconic, historic, legacy universities as well. But then it all comes at a cost, and if you're not ready to pay the cost, then I would say you reconsider your choices.
Your advice to students, why one should consider studying abroad and why they should not?
Why they should not? Because you cannot do what your friend is doing, or you cannot do what your cousin is doing. You've got to do it because you want to do it, and you've got to be very, very clear in your mind. Of course, I see a big change in the students from 10 years ago. Students today, they're a lot smarter. They have access to a lot of information at their fingertips today. They can chat with students who are on campus. They can use platforms like Unibuddy, and there are so many other platforms in the market. They get real-time information, real-time experience from the real stakeholders. They get information from the horse's mouth rather than relying on external sources, and that really makes them smart students today. But then again, be very clear with your subject choices, because I see a lot of them going to the recruitment fairs, going into agent offices, or even calling the university representative and asking what is the scope for this subject, which is one question which still makes me laugh, because I've never been able to answer that question myself. It's the scope of that industry shouldn't matter to you, so long as you're passionate and you think you can make a mark in the industry. You make that industry more scopeable, right, is what really matters. So I think be wise with your choices. Just because somebody wants to do a subject and somebody's advised you to do something, and again, I talk out of my experiences, because biotechnology perhaps wasn't my choice, to be very honest. It so happened that my 12th standard results were out. My mom called one of her cousins, who apparently lived in Delhi at that point. He's now moved away from Delhi, and he was at that point at a very prominent position in a pharmaceutical company. And without a second thought, he advised my mom, he's got a good score, maybe let him do biotechnology. And my fate was sort of pretty much decided that biotechnology, and because the city where I studied had a decent Asian community, so the university was also more or less decided. So again, don't make those mistakes that we've made.
Very true.
Yeah, and again, we didn't have a lot of choices. We didn't have access to technology, information, etc., etc. You have almost all university representatives at your convenience today. You can chat to them, email them, call them, etc. Get as much information as you can from them. Talk to students. Go LinkedIn. It's a beautiful platform. I absolutely love LinkedIn, because you can talk to alumni. You can look at the success stories as to where have people gone, after graduating from these universities, which tells you so much about an institute. And I think that's one exercise that every student must do when they're deciding on the university. So that's I can keep talking about it all day.
But imagine your wrong decision or decision something which you believe could have been better.
Correct.
Had got you here.
Correct.
So even if I do the same thing. Get out of your comfort zone. Get out of your city.
Correct.
If you can study in India outside your city, please. If you can go abroad, don't shy away. It's the best investment over a long term.
Absolutely.
Probably 3-5 years you might feel, but over a period, and if you have also explored and live each and every moment, and as you mentioned, in an internalization, if you are actually not shy away and explore and live each and every bit when you are abroad, it will make you travel places.
Absolutely.
Right. Your last bit to education partners or agents, what do you call it?
I think it's time for them to come together. It's high time that we come together, because what really hurts us sometimes is the lack of communication between ourselves. I mean, to give you a very recent example, I was in Bangalore, and very surprised to know that the two biggest agencies in the city are apparently holding their fair on the same day. Now that is nothing but splitting of audience, and then you're hurting yourself, right? You're hurting your own footfall in the fair, and the only reason for them to do that is lack of communication between them, because they don't communicate that I'm doing this Sunday, maybe you can take the next Sunday, right? And we're fighting for the same venues, we're fighting for the same dates, and that is taking the opportunities away from the students, because he may have gone to both the fairs, experienced more universities, spoken to more universities, and that would have given him more options to explore as well. So I think that communication, that will help us organize ourselves better, that will help us address a lot of issues that we're facing in the industry, whether it's staff poaching, whether it's other issues that we're facing. I think it's time that we all come together under one umbrella as one industry, and like you said, Saurabh, there's enough pie for us to mark our share, and I think it's time that we start working together.
Absolutely. I guess that's it. You are recording on 2nd October. Your flight, your family must be waiting. So thank you so much for coming all over.
Thank you, Saurabh. Really enjoyed. Thank you for the opportunity, and it was really a pleasure. I really like the way you conducted. It was so candid, so natural. I wish I could have seen the questions before, but then you made it very, very simple, very easy.
Good things happen simply. Be complicated.
Thank you.
And if we are candid and open, this is you. And for you don't need to prepare. When you're not you, then we need to prepare. So take it easy always.
I agree with that.
Done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone. Thank you.